Welcome to Smarter Circuits, the podcast. I am the Walrus, Goo Goo Gajoob. Today I want to talk about matter, and why I don't like it. And it's actually part of a larger topic that I'll discuss here in a moment. But first, I want to mention a couple things. I'm not going to do the old business, new business thing anymore because it was meant to support a theme that I never did. So I'm just not going to do it because it's kind of weird and takes up time. If I have something to talk about other than the main topic, I'll just get it out of the way. Speaking of which, the next thing that I want to talk about actually does lead into the main topic, and that is I will not be doing the protocols video. I will not be doing the protocols video because it's 50 pages plus the script. And even though I could split it up, that was suggested to me, and rightly so, it wouldn't remain as cohesive as it is. Or I would at least have to rewrite 80% of it to make it make any kind of sense on its own without the things that came before it. Because it was all very interconnected, at least as far as like the flow of the thing. And I want to keep it that way. So I'm probably just going to convert it into an article of some kind, and then just put it out somewhere. I'll link it at some point if I do that, or when I do that, I should say. So the other thing that kept me from doing it is I kept getting distracted, not just by life stuff, although that happens too, but by these weird, what I've been calling brand protocols. This actually made me realize that there was a whole other topic that I wanted to talk about. And that brings me to the matter thing. And there are these protocols that don't really serve a purpose other than to try to lock you in. And some of them are sneakier than others about it. Matter, I believe, is one of those. So matter is, if you don't know, a protocol designed to, quote unquote, unify your home automation devices by essentially making them speak the same language. Now, before I get too deep into the reasons that I feel that it's not a good thing, there's two things that I want you to understand. One, at a very high level, and I will be brief, the OSI model. The OSI model is a model that network and computer professionals use to describe and define the different layers of computer communication system, network. You don't need to know all of the layers, but what you do need to know is that at the very top is the application layer, and this is where the user interacts with the program, or where the program serves its purpose. And then at the very bottom, you have the physical connection that those systems share. There are a couple layers above that physical layer that are semi-relevant, but you don't actually even need to know them. You just need to know that at the top is the application and at the bottom is the physical. So the more fundamental things are towards the bottom. Matter is an application layer protocol. So it's at the very top, and it can ride on other protocols that exist in the lower, and it has to, in fact, right? So specifically, Matter can ride on top of any IP-based system. So Thread or Wi-Fi, basically. There's probably some others that I'm not thinking of, but those are the ones that you'll see and that we're concerned with. Because Thread enters into this a little bit as well. I don't think that Thread is all that great either. And I'll explain as we continue. So the other thing that I'd like you to understand is TCP/IP communication. And again, you don't have to understand the technical part of it, but understand that it is the way that we have decided the internet should talk for a very long time. As a matter of fact, we decided that was the way that was best for computers to talk in most situations prior to the internet. TCP has actually been around since the mid-60s. It was called something else, and it was very theoretical at the time. And then in the 70s, it became TCP. But essentially, the guy that created it he came up with the anatomy of the TCP packets and also the UDP packets. Another thing that we don't need to talk about, but exists. And as technology progressed, because of the straight to the point simplicity of the protocol itself, that it started with the most minute building blocks and the most ambiguous functions, every layer that was laid on top of those initial building blocks has been able to simply amend or build on top of the existing protocol. So the protocol evolved. And instead of replacing it, they just continuously tweaked it and modified it and improved it. And very slowly, so that the technology industry could keep up and so that devices wouldn't immediately become foreign to one another. And it's actually so backwards compatible that my computers downstairs running DOS, Windows 3.11, Windows 95, they can still get on my network. They can still talk with my modern computers. There are some things they can't do, and I definitely wouldn't connect them to the internet because they would almost assuredly just become virus. But yeah, all of that backwards compatibility is because of the very thorough nature in which TCP/IP evolved over decades. Now, let's go back to Matter and its stated purpose of unification. And I also want to bring up something else. Matter is open source. So the idea behind that is that any manufacturer can pick it up, put it in their device, and their device now talks to the Matter ecosystem. And that's supposed to give the end user a feeling of cooperation, right? And openness. And if anybody doesn't implement this, well, they obviously don't care about you. At least that's the intended sentiment. The companies that make this know full well that other companies that are their direct competitors aren't going to just jump in and start using their technology. If they see you making a thing, a procedure in their industry that is supposed to become the ruling guide for how everybody does it, and you don't like them or they don't like you, they're probably going to either, well, number one, they're not going to come on board. And number two, there's a very high possibility that they will try to create a competing technology. And that's exactly what happened. There are quite a few, universal technologies that are going to bring everybody together, kumbaya style. Zigbee, Z-Wave, Bluetooth mesh, Wi-Fi itself, universal plug and play. That's an interesting one that still exists and is actually pretty old and works pretty well, actually. It's just not widely adopted in things that aren't printers and that sort of thing. Excuse me. And then there's also the Open Communication Foundation stuff. So all of these things are trying to do more or less the same thing. A couple of them do have value adds. Zigbee, for instance, has longer range. I think Z-Wave might as well. I'm not sure. And Zigbee also offers high speed. As I understand it, there's an argument to be made versus Wi-Fi that it's much, much lower latency, which is absolutely irrelevant if you're not just being pedantic. Because at the end of the day, if you lived in the era of incandescent light bulbs, your lights did not come on as fast as the IoT devices are turning them on now anyway. But I digress. I could go way, way, way down that path. But suffice it to say, I will accept for today's purposes that Zigbee is useful in that it has a value add, where Matter does not. All Matter is doing is saying, I want all of you to use these commands, to talk this way. And there's a bunch of other stuff that does the same kind of thing. MQTT, for instance, which is way better in my opinion, just based on being simple. Now, there's some things that Matter offers that aren't offered by MQTT, but they're nothing that it doesn't already exist within the other communication protocols. I am of the firm opinion that most, if not all, of that communication should be done either via straight TCP socket communication or over HTTPS, because webhooks are a thing, and my devices, because they're Shelly, have them. So here's something that I think everybody should consider when they're looking at a technology that does not allow you to connect directly to a device through an interface. My Shelly devices can talk to one another. Now, you say, okay, so can the Zigbee devices. They do. That's how they work. That's how they build their network. But what I mean is I can tell my motion sensor to send a web request to my light relay to turn my light on. So I don't even need to involve a middleman like Home Assistant. Now, I still have Home Assistant, and I still use Home Assistant to manually control, and I still use Home Assistant to show me the state of a thing, but I don't have to rely on Home Assistant to do that device triggering. And if Home Assistant goes down or part of my network goes down and I still have network access to that device, I can log directly into that device and control it. You can't do that with Zigbee, for instance. Now, that's not always important, or not always as important. For me, it's a necessity. I do not like devices that I cannot get into easily and turn them on or off, use them directly. Anyway, the next thing that I want to talk about with Matter is the idea that you can create vast interoperability. There are some technologies that do because of their purpose and nature, right? Again, most of the internet protocol technologies that we've been talking about. But the other problem with interoperability between IoT devices is the actual implementation of the standard. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are widely adopted similarly because they have very sorted out, very consistent protocols and manufacturing. There's a lot of them available because they're common, and there's common because there's a lot available. Like, it's a very strange circular relationship. But most devices connect to your Wi-Fi the same way. And that's not necessarily true for things like Zigbee and whatnot. As a matter of fact, I think it's Zigbee. I could be wrong about this, but there's one that, and I don't remember the full details, I admit. When I was first setting the thing up, when I went to buy a coordinator, it was like, well, you could have a 700 or an 800 or this, and this wouldn't talk to that, and that wouldn't talk to this. And you know what talks to my access point? Everything. All of the things, my phone, my TVs, my game consoles, they all talk to the Wi-Fi. And the game console thing is kind of interesting because for the latency argument, for people that say, well, Wi-Fi is just slow, games, multiplayer games, I have seen sub-100 millisecond latency in multiplayer games. So I know that it's possible. The problem usually is processing power. Now, Wi-Fi is hungrier. So one of the things that is an advantage of Zigbee and a claimed advantage of Thread is using lower power. And that's fine. Okay. I do think that there are devices that are frugal enough with their resources to last a long time and still be able to report on Wi-Fi. But you still don't need to go to Thread or Zigbee when Bluetooth low energy exists. And you can have a mesh coverage with Bluetooth if you get the right devices. And the reason why I don't mind the gateways with the Bluetooth network or with my own, because let's consider Wi-Fi, you have to have a hub, you have to have your access point, right? Is because those are not the only things that can connect to those. Those are broad reach technologies. They are widely adopted technologies accepted in their industry. And they're not made by random companies that just kind of came together and decided to do the thing. There's a lot more involved, put it that way, when it comes to things like, HTTPS. So here's another one. Where was I going? Oh, unification thing. Another point on the unification thing. If you want to know what truly gives you unification, the answer is simple. It's Home Assistant or OpenHAB or whatever it is that you use. It's your control system. Your control system aggregates and brings everything else together. It's the router of your control schema. It talks the languages of all the other things. That is the closest thing that you're going to get to something unifying. It's not going to be a thing within one of those subsystems, right? It's going to be the thing that exists outside all of them that can talk to all of them. Your digital Sweden. Thread and Matter also require things on top of other things. So Thread, you have to have more hardware. Matter, you have to have more software. You have to have an add-on or something, where most web technology is built right in and is, again, standard across all platforms. You don't need to worry about what can access it because everything can access it. The speed, again, you can address that issue if it's even really an issue. And if it is, if you have to go to a long range solution, there's other reasons, other circumstances. There are things like Zigbee that actually solve a problem. Thread existed before Matter, number one. The Google Nest had it, as a matter of fact. And number two, is not the only mesh game in town. Wi-Fi also has mesh capability, and it's pretty good, especially if you use any kind of enterprise solution like Ubiquiti. My Wi-Fi network is just fine. It's been perfectly dependable with well over 130 devices. I don't know what the last count was. I just know that I've added a lot since the last time. Part of that is because I do experimentation, but anyway. So with the hardware edition with Thread, you don't get any other connectivity other than the device that has Thread. Whereas with Wi-Fi, again, the phones, everything connects to it. Security and privacy is another thing that people tout about Matter. And I don't care. Bull. Anyway, you're telling me that communicating with TLS or SSL is not good enough? If that's true, why is it, okay for the military or, the entire internet? Is the security and cryptography on Matter a smaller package, lighter, maybe more efficient? And possibly, I guess. But there are plenty of hardware encryption methods. And honestly, anymore, even microprocessors don't have that much trouble with it. It's not super complicated now. It's been around for a long time. Now, there might be, again, I'm putting these caveats here because I don't want somebody to find some nitpicky thing about the cryptography library that makes it 10% faster. I don't even care if it's 200% faster. It's not necessary. It's additional. And the speed difference is not even noticeable by humans. Anyway, so what all this is to say is that Matter and Thread, in my opinion, they're not innovating. They're not creating anything new. What they are doing, though, and this is probably the worst part, and one of the reasons why I hate that there are a bunch of YouTubers that push this, it's another avenue for obsolescence. It's another thing that the companies can go, you know what, we're not going to support this anymore, so now you have to buy new devices because your radios literally won't talk to the new devices, or they don't speak the same language, or the authentication isn't the same, or whatever it is. It allows them to obsolesce, and that's not really cool. Yeah, and the rest of it, the mesh thing is solvable. I don't think Thread has a whole lot of range extension. I'm not sure about that, admittedly, but it's never been a problem for me because, I put my access points in a very central location. I have two to cover, the very long nature of my building. And it all works just fine. Bluetooth. I can use my Shelly Bluetooth button from one end of the house when the Home Assistant is at the other end of the house because of the Bluetooth gateways. And while the speed on that one isn't perfect, it could be improved. Again, the other part of this is don't invent a new thing when somebody has already done 90% of the work and all you need to do is improve it a little bit more in order to get it to be what you need it to be. If the existing web technologies aren't secure enough, we have bigger issues. And if Wi-Fi isn't fast enough, build a better device. These radios operate at 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. There's a lot of room in there for quite a bit of data. And that's, real quick, that's the other thing that kind of bugs me about all of these things. We're adding all of this complexity to very simple tasks. I like the way MQTT works because it is a message queuing system. No more, no less. It's very good at what it does. And it has efficacy. It is efficient and effective. It uses very little resources to get the job done completely. The data that we are moving around for most of these things, not counting security cameras, amounts to an on or off signal for a relay, or maybe a digital representation of, a value for a dimmer, or even sensor data, even real-time sensor data. This is super, super tiny information. So it's not really necessary to put all this complexity to it. If all of the devices simply used webhooks, right? Anybody in the software development world knows what a REST API is. And guess what? Most of these devices and services have them or something similar. So you don't need all this new stuff. Anyway, I've babbled enough. I'm starting to repeat myself. I'm getting very tired. This has been a very long day. I have recorded this podcast episode like at least half a dozen times because I kept having issues. I killed a hard drive. One of my laptops won't talk to my mixer. I have a dead microphone. There's all kinds of stuff that's just been kind of working against me. And I'm late to boot, obviously, which I do apologize about that. Yeah. Anyway. Lastly, I guess the channel update. Really, the only thing that I have there is that I'm 11 watch hours away from being a full YouTube partner, which is, you get the ad revenue. It's not a whole lot or anything, but it's a step. It's like one of those things. It's like, hey, it's more official now that this is the thing that I'm doing. And they take me a little bit more seriously. But yeah, now that it can also go the other direction. Even though I only have 11 left, that doesn't mean that I'm, if I had 25 watch hours a year ago today, and I had 10 watch hours today, I will lose 15 watch hours because of the rolling year thing. So, but it is the closest that I've been, and I don't know what happens if you like sort of jitter on the line. I'm sure that they have a procedure for that, or maybe that's why they wait, because I do know that they have I think I've heard anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks that they'll, that you'll have gone over the qualification number and YouTube doesn't send you a thing until then. Maybe it's to be sure. I don't know. I'm sure that they have some sort of thing, and I'm sure that I could probably read it on the terms of service. I just don't feel like doing it right now. And on that note, I would like to thank all of my members, subscribers, viewers, listeners, and attentive telepaths for your minutes. We are all given an unknown supply, limited supply of minutes, and you've spent some of yours with me. I do greatly appreciate that. I say it in every video and podcast episode because it is sincere. I really do mean that. Time is the greatest gift you can give anybody. Yeah. So I do hope you'll spend a little bit more with me next week as I continue to rattle on and gripe about smarter circuits.